thanks everyone for showing up. My name is Bruce Cronquist, and hopefully you're here to see Promoting Flourishing in Hard Times, Theoretical Reflections on the Ethics of Care in Distance Learning. And I thought it was kind of cool. I was looking through it, and, reflection of the ethical care, you had paying attention to the emergency remote teaching and learning where teachers have to be attentive to both the technical and the human aspects. And I thought that was kind of cool when I was looking through the abstract. So I'm looking forward to the talk. I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, thank you very much. The topic of this presentation, I think, is very actual because we're still thinking about the COVID-19 emergency. We are not far from this moment. So I think we can take some information from that, but I think this kind of reflection does not concern emergency remote teaching, but distance learning in every times in primary and in secondary education. So what does it, and we are going to see. We're going to see how orthotics-oriented practices of care can be implemented, especially in emergency remote teaching and learning. But to understand this, before we have to recognize some of the theoretical foundation of the concept of care, and then we are going to see some good care practices in the educational field. So let's start from the beginning. When we talk about the theories of caring, our roots, we think that our roots go into Plato's Apologies by Socrates. And then we talk very later about caring in the 20th century with Heidegger, and more recently with the feminine thoughts with Sarah Roddick, Eva Kitty, John Tronto, and Neil Noddings. Professor Mortari, who works in the University of Verona in Italy, did a lot of studies concerning theories of caring. And from these theoretical roots, she stressed different elements which constitute a foundation of care. We said that care is a primary dimension of the human life. Because we could talk about primary care, since human being needs both to be the object of care, but also to take care from others, for the others. So from this point of view, we can understand that caring has a protensive nature, because from the phenomenological point of view, caring is a practice that takes place in a relationship between a caregiver and another person who receives care. Caring can be conceived as epimeleia. It's a Greek word which means helping students in educational setting. We talk about educational setting. It means so helping students to cultivate the desire to care for themselves. Just not teachers that take care for students, but support students to take care from themselves. And it means that to accompany them through the process of building those cognitive skills and emotional attitudes they need to self-regulate and to be self-sufficient and enthusiastic on their existences. And concerning this relational posture, it's necessary to understand the point of view of Noddings, which have two key elements in her theories. On one hand, receptiveness, and on the other hand, responsiveness. With the word, with the expression receptiveness, it means assuming a passive posture through which it is possible to listen to the other, to let the other express without influence the other who is speaking to us. On the other hand, we had responsiveness, which means answering to the others adequately, without going beyond what he or he is going to say. And there are different posture, action we could adopt to take care in educational setting. For example, we could be available both at a cognitive and emotional level. We could act empathy. We should be attentive. We should give security to the other. We should be unobtrusive. We should be capable of waiting the other that express himself or herself. We could cultivate positive, healthy sentiments, feelings, and it's very important to be reflective. So wait the time and think about what happened in the moment and what happened in the past to acquire awareness about what happens or what happened before. But another element, an essential element of good educational cares is the ethical instance, which have to characterize the posture of an educator to make him or her devote mindful attention to the other by showing solicitude. And but it is not the ethical substance, the ethical instance is not just a theoretical element because it arises from concrete embodied encounter with the other. It's not an abstract principle, and it consists of being responsible for the other, having respect, and wishing for what is good for the other. So being giving for the other. And the ethical principle and posture have to be assumed mostly in a moment of crisis. And more recently, we think about COVID-19, the war conflicts, because ethic of care represent a way of being the world that consider, first of all, fragilities. And it seeks to reduce vulnerabilities and cultivates the becoming of being and remaining faithful to the desire that move into this way, the desire for the good. But an element which is a key element to analyze the document, the theories, the experiences, the research that we could find in literature it's necessary to distinguish ethics and moralities because we have different studies on the ethical dimension on distance learning, but very few researches on ethical issues in emergency remote teaching and learning. On one hand, because it is a recent phenomenon, but because most of this research, of these articles and papers, ethical issues are read through the gaze of morality. So we have to recur, which distinguish ethic from morality. Ethic has a theological perspective. It has attention toward goods, what is good. On the other hand, and not the opposite, but on the other hand, we have morality, which is the deontological perspective, and it has attention toward normativities. So if you have to work, if you want to see at the emergency remote teaching and learning, we find more attention toward normativity and less toward the good. But let's see some example of that, just to have some insights from what you can find in literature. We have different examples of research that focus on the moral dimension. We have, for example, the code of ethics for online learning during crisis. But if you go inside this document, what we could find, the commitment to distance educational system, the commitment to profession, teacher, student responsibilities, respect the protection of the digital dignity. So it's not exactly a movement toward the good in itself. We have a great amount of literature which focus on cheating behavior, which includes academic integrity, ethics of student practices, illegal commercial activities, cheating, academic cheating, relational among personal values, the use of the efficacy and a correct use of technologies, copyright issues, ownership issues, and we all know these are essential information to know and to manage for distance learning and for remote teaching learning and teaching learning, but they can't be all what we could say about distance learning. We have indeed some example of researches focused on the ethical dimension. Some papers talk about equity in terms of sex in emergency remote teaching and learning. And we have different elements in terms of inequalities. We have vital inequalities, resource inequalities, existential inequalities. We have then a focus of the dimension of learning to address the focus to the dimension of care in the learning environment, because we could improve online teaching practices by enacting a pedagogy of care. Whited and Sisk stressed the need of an ethics of care, recall in Toronto, and it matched ethics of care with cosmopolitanism of MD to support students engaged in development the skills required by the course of studying, but copy as well with COVID-19 situation. And this paper, there are some interesting suggestions. For example, explicit teaching empathy in class, promoting reflective practices to foster socio-emotional connection, or involving graduate students in the clinic management to teach mutual care and socio-emotional connection. And we have also Robin's paper, who show how to act on care ethics in online teaching based on modeling authentic caring. And here we have this very important dimension of the authentic task on the authentic environment through story, practices, and continuing dialogue to empower these kind of ethical issues. What happened in Italy? I told at the beginning, I would like to share with us some theoretical reflection about ethics in emergency remote teaching and learning. But these theoretical elements have found their roots in a research. We realized 2 years ago in Italy with the Melete Research Group, which is within University of Verona in Italy. It was a qualitative research which matched grounded theory and the phenomenological approach aimed to understanding teacher experience concerning emergency remote teaching and learning. And we have more or less 1,000 primary and secondary school teachers who answer to some to 3 open questions given by a software to them, of course. From the results, we did a secondary analysis of the results of this research, because this kind of data have been reinterpreted through the conceptual framework of the ethics of care to understand how ethics-oriented care practices can be implemented in the different school grades in emergency remote teaching and learning. So let's see what we discover from this secondary analysis. One of the elements that we found very often is the care of relationship. Teachers work hard. So what does it mean? They had a significant time and commitment to foster closeness, even in the distance toward the student. And we recall this element, the receptivity and the responsiveness of noddings, thoughts we talked before, because it is a posture based on attention, the continuous support to the virtue of friendship, which include, of course, receptivity and responsiveness. Then in this data, we read a lot of emotional relationality, because thinking always lies within a feeling, emotion, which nourishes action. So during the online activities, the distance learning activities, it's important to taking care not only to the learning objectives, but also to the emotional life of students by promoting an attentive learning context, a virtual learning context, where we could pay attention to emotion, to feelings. Then we have a lot of hints concerning instructional design. We discovered that some disciplines were more challenging to teach than others because they had a very practical dimension. It was very difficult to experience in distance learning, and more with emergency remote teaching learning. But we have to say that even in the online learning environment, it's necessary to take care to adopt some form of laboratories of experiences, because without the active participation, the knowledge, the competencies, the skills the students could acquire loses their significance and become inert in some way. Then we discovered something about assessment design, because I think we all know that the traditional way to evaluate the pupils and students, to assess their learning processes and outcomes in this new situation really lacks of the reality principle, because we couldn't, it was impossible to adopt the same form, the same strategies, the same techniques we adopt in class in the online environment. And in this recalling ethics of care, it's important to focus the attention on some form of formative assessment to accompany the flourishing of each person, instead of assess just the reaching of some goals, some aims in terms of assessment. And it is also very important to think about the virtue of measure to create authentic alliance between school and families, because we discovered that a lot of families influence the teaching and learning activities, and also families. Every person which attend emergency remote teaching learning have to measure their participation and their ask for help or for knowledge, for everything, because there were a lot of an osmotic situation between families, school, teachers, students. So it was very difficult from this point of view in terms of assessment. Then we have, of course, the protection of people. We talk about that cheating element concerning normativity have concern moral, but it is as well important to protect the right to privacy, which could be at risks. But it was an ethics attention to the privacy, to the right of pupils of privacy. So it's important to strengthen school-family co-responsibility, creating communities which could be, we hope, permeated by the culture of hospitality and a rigorous convivialities. And at the end, we couldn't take away of our reasoning the principal role and the school organization, because when coordination is lacking, the teacher actually perceives it as a critical element. And the competent leadership requires not only an organizational approach, but also a relational and a ethical level, which influence the teaching learning practices directly. So what we could say in conclusion, we understand, I think, just a bit what does taking care in educational setting means. We realize what does it mean, ethics and morality in taking care. We focus attention on ethics-oriented care practices in remote teaching and learning, both from the moral and ethics point of view. But we realize that we don't have a ready-to-use solution. We don't have toolkit or good practices in ethics of care, but just some guidelines which arose from theoretical background, theoretical framework. And with this guideline, we could suggest teachers to rethink some educational practices in their specific learning context. So we just could give some suggestion, and each teacher had to adapt the suggestion in their context, the daily context of practices. But it's not enough. We need another step. We need to go in beyond, because literature is not enough concerning ethical care. So we, after encouraging teachers to practice this kind of suggestion, we have to suggest teachers to analyze their educational project through an heuristic action to gain new knowledge concerning this very complex context that is ethics of care in educational settings. So I thank you very much, and I'm here and wait for your question if you have some. Hadi.
Yeah, I don't see any online right now. While we're waiting to see if Sean has any in the room, I have a question. You were talking about, the teacher-pupil relationship, and I think as your fourth bullet talked about setting up some guidelines for that instead of rules. Okay, I can understand that for like smaller class sizes to where, we're dealing with, 5 or, maybe 20 students. What about very large class sizes, even like up to MOOCs where there's, hundreds of people attending? Would the set of guidelines change?
Yeah, I think we have some good suggestions from the literature concerning especially assessment, because assessment could, a summative assessment, a very challenging assessment could, does not facilitate a good climate in class, even in online classroom. So support students to work together. Also in assessment, for example, I think it's a different point of view, not only group activities online, but also support students working together in terms of peer assessment, for example, or sharing authentic the approaching, coping with authentic tasks together. It's a good way to improve relationship also in distance learning. So it's another point of view. I think we could be useful to the relationship.
Okay, great, thanks. So Sean, are there
In this help, so sorry, sorry, Bruce, and this help also in large class. This was your question, because it's very difficult. I think in higher education we have class of 200 students. It's difficult to have a relation with each of our students. But we could promote a deeper relationship among our students, and then of course be available as a teacher, as a lecturer to our students when necessary.
Right, the numbers game where you can teach more people in our classes, that's a bonus for the universities and things, but it does affect our relationship as a teacher or professor with our students.
Yeah.
So Sean, are there any questions from the room?
Yes, we have a question here.
Yeah.
It's maybe not a question, but more coming up from Denmark. And we also had the same problems and issues that you had during the pandemic. And,
I really can't hear you.
Okay, yeah, maybe you might want to speak a little closer. Yeah, yes.
I'm over here. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, now it's
better.
fine. Yeah, I'm from Denmark, and I'm teaching at a university college, and I have a lot of similar things that you have. Yeah, you can take a camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But what I have recognized here afterwards, the pandemic, is that we have a closer relationship between the students and the teachers, because while we were having this distance learning, they seen our children, and the children was saying, "What are you doing right now?" and so on. So that was just a comment for you, and thank you for your.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. We have the same perception from our data. Yeah, it was very challenging from the relationship point of view, but we could discover something new. We could take some new insight of this emergency period, and we have to make treasure from that. Just not to want to come back what happened before.
Yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you too.
Great. Any other questions from the room?
No.
Okay.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Lucia. It was a very interesting presentation. I love these
Thank you too,
more, looking at the ethics and not the actual just applications of teaching, but some of the other things. So it was a very interesting talk. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Bye,
thank you. All of us. Bye.